Hello everyone, I'm Cameron, and this week I've gotten an hour in to Pit People. Made by the Behemoths, creators of Castle Crashers, Battle Block Theater, and Alien Hominid, Pit People was released in 2018 and is a hex-based, turn-based strategy fantasy RPG. After 60 minutes of playing, I've been left with a pretty decent experience. I really can't find anything in this game to complain about it, except for maybe the small annoyance of the learning curve. This is, for the most part, my first strategy game I've ever really played, so I found myself getting destroyed in my first few random battles. Even with the small amount of time I've been playing, I feel I've mounted that curve. Relatively.
That was kind of cheap.
Next is everything else that's given off such a great experience. To begin, the presentation is splendid. Behemoth's cartoon-like aesthetic has always been a favorite of mine. And the soundtrack is some of the most bumpinest and groovinest songs I've heard since Hotline Miami, which is why I'm using them in this video. Will Stamper is back as the narrator, and I believe most every other voice in the game, and is a delight as usual. And with Stamper comes heaps of charming wit and a lot of childish immaturity, which fills up nearly every second of playing. I find myself being reminded of a lot of Monty Python skits with how absurd and cynical most of the humor is. And the comedy really culminates in the cutscenes.
You're quite good at barely scraping by, aren't you, my resilient little worms? Yet I could close my paw and squish you like the very berries Horatio's worthless farm produces. You're depressing me, Pip. Why the long face? Your hands are bloody with the sweet tang of revenge. Problem solved, right? So turn that frown upside down.
Hey, no!
Oh, have we bonded? How precious.
But now let's get into the actual game of this game. As I said before, Pit People is a strategy game. Combat plays out in turns between the player and the computer. The player controls a team of up to 6 characters, all with specialized jobs, such as capturing enemies to add to your team, healing, or moving enemies to a different tile. There is also a rock, paper, scissors system, where certain weapons become more or less effective against specific types of enemies. And speaking of weapons, there's a fair amount of variety with them. There are several different classifications of melee and ranged weapons, going from light to heavy in each category. And all of these, of course, carry over the charm from the rest of the game. For instance, a bow and arrow that shoots big, juicy wiener. And the same goes for all the armor. Most of the weapon and armors add extra stats that allow you to min-max your party, as well as add to your weight, which affects your movement speed. Which leads me to my next point, that this is a pretty decent introduction into the strategy genre of games. Nothing in this game feels too complex or confusing, which may be a downside to some players, but for me, it's quite welcome, as I'm far from a seasoned veteran of strategy games. There's still enough depth and complexity in this game that I would find it hard to believe that anyone got bored while playing. So after only playing 1 hour of Pit People, I would highly recommend it to anyone who wants a good time. With simple yet challenging gameplay and a healthy dose of absurd humor, I'd be hard pressed to find someone who wouldn't enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and take it easy.